Good evening. I hope everybody's doing great. Today we're going to talk about Module 5. So let's just do first a quick review for this week. Last week we had Module 4, so make sure you turned everything in. Let me know if there's any issues, and then we can go over it if there was anything from Module 4 as we're moving on to Module 5. And we're going to focus on social psychology for this module. And we're going to go over what you need to know for this week and everything. Remember the due dates. Let me know if there's anything, but otherwise we continue with watching the videos, doing the knowledge tech, doing your mind tap, doing your journals, and that's the assignment for this week. So let me just go over it in case you have any questions as a review. So you start off reading the chapters, watching the videos. The first one is going to be raise your hand if you have ever done a bad thing, no matter how big or small. So we're looking at, is it you or is it the situation? Social psychology, it's not sociology, but social psychology. Remember, psychology is all about you. It's all about the individual. And so when you look at social psychology, it's how does the environment impact your behavior, your actions, your thoughts. So how is other people, how is the environment affecting you? So the situation. So we talk about dispositional factors, situational factors. Disposition is who you are, your personality, and stable over time. Situational is you're having a bad day, you didn't get enough sleep. So it's not who you are. So if somebody cuts you off or somebody's rude in the line, they just had a fight with their significant other, they had the baby up all night, kept them up. So it's not an excuse, but it's just that's not the norm. That's not the norm for you. It's a situation that is increasing the likelihood of that happening. So we're going to talk about different situations that can bring out different things in different people, and how that can increase for some people the reactions, like we're going to talk about. Milgram study, there's some major studies in social psychology. Milgram study, Ash study, Kitty Genovese, for example, and bystander effect. So fundamental attribution error would be give people the benefit of the doubt when they kind of cut you off in traffic, or just if it's a one-time thing, depending on what it is, of course. But if it's not major, you can say, well, maybe they're having a bad day, maybe it's just today. If they continually is a pattern, then that might be just the personality or something they're going through that's long-lasting. But again, is it the situation? Are they in an abusive relationship? Are they in a job they hate? Are they in a country where there's war and it's stressful? Or is it young kids? Like there's different things that can increase stress, that can modify behavior. Definitely not getting enough sleep can definitely change people's behavior. It increases irritability and concentration, so you might be distracted. So if you're not getting enough sleep, it's not your personality, it's who you are, it's a situation. What if you have sleep apnea or insomnia? I was working with a client who was on vacation with her sister, and her sister's like, she just keeps snoring and she stops breathing, and during the vacation she didn't want to do much, she wanted to sleep a lot. She's like, why did she even come on the vacation if she's just going to stay in the room? And what it turns out is that the sister realized that her other sister has sleep apnea. She stops breathing up to 500 times a night. Sounds like choking. It can be obstruction due to needing to have weight loss or just surgery. So it's not psychological. It's something about, biology, medical, that needs to be addressed. Maybe the sleep pap machine, or they have some things you can put in your mouth. So with a doctor, sleep specialist, sleep apnea can be treated. And this person had weight issues, which can, because while you're sleeping, it can increase cortisol. It's like somebody putting a pillow over your head many times a night, and you kind of suffocate, but you don't realize it because then you go back to breathing. So it's obstruction of the air passage. And so it wasn't this person's personality, it was they weren't getting enough sleep. They were, this is really so lazy and irritable. But yeah, sleep apnea can cause all of that. It can cause heart issues. It can cause irritability. You're not sleeping. You're waking up. You're not getting enough REM. So you're waking up many times during the night and you don't even know it. So you wake up feeling tired, moody, like you didn't get a good night's rest, but you were in bed all night and you're like, what's going on? Like, I'm so tired, I'm so irritable, all the symptoms of sleep deprivation. But you're confused because you're like, I'm sleeping, and you don't realize that many times because you don't come up to the levels of awake. So we go through stages 1, 2, 3, 4, deep sleep, and then when you go back up, and during this time, she just kept waking up, not getting enough REM. We need REM for our brain, for our mood. So if you're sleep deprived, again, it's the situation for many reasons. There could be a neighbor, it could be a dog, and then it affects your irritability, your reaction to stress, it affects your weight, concentration, mood, so many things for kids too. So that's an example of a client that I've worked with that it's situational. So it's the situation that's causing it. Once you get, I've seen it before, once they get the mask or surgery or lose the weight and they can breathe well, they get enough sleep, they don't wake up many times during the night, all of a sudden their mood increases, concentration, weight issues are much better, just overall well-being. And so it wasn't who they were. I mean, if you have sleep apnea and it gets treated and you're still that way, it could be your personality. It wasn't situational. The situation was making it worse, but that's actually the way you are. You're maybe more sedentary, not wanting to do much, or maybe it's depression, maybe it's something else. So social psychology is looking at how do other people, how does your environment, how do situational factors impact the way you behave, the way you think. And so this video is going to look at that. Was it because of so it's asking you, have you ever done a bad thing? You don't have to share in the class. That's not, we'll have a discussion for you to turn in. So for this week, we don't have class. So please, I'm going to ask you to turn in email to me as part of participation. Just make sure you turn it in. I'll put the dates on the email that I sent out, an announcement, so you know, and I'll also post it under discussion so you get credit for attendance as you email to me. Because usually during class we would have a discussion, so I would break you up into groups, maybe 15 minutes of discussion, and then it come up with what would you do in that situation. So that's what social psychologists love to do. What would you do in that situation? Which is funny because my daughter always has asked me that since she's little. She just did this the other day. She said, it's very cold right now. And she said, for how much money would you jump into the river or the lake? And I was like, and it was really cold recently, and I couldn't see a place where you can get out. And she's like, what's the minimum that you would jump in? And then I tell her, she's like, what? That's a lot. I would do it for this much. Or she asks me things like, for how much would you eat this food, like a gross food? Or it's so funny to me. I guess in her mind, she's always thinking of situations like, for a price, or what would you do? She's like, what would you do if I pushed you in? Okay, I said I would be very upset, so don't even think about it. And so in this, we'll have another discussion. I want to ask you what you think for Milgram study. What do you think you would do? But for here, if you have ever done a bad thing, no matter how big or small, whatever you consider bad, or others, objectively, was it because of the situation you were in? And let me think of another example. So situational and fundamental attribution error is when you think it's the person. You're like, that he's just a jerk. Somebody cuts you off. What if they're on the way to deliver a baby? Like, they need to do this to cut in line because it's an emergency, or they swerve and it's to not hit a puppy, and you don't even know that. And you think, wow, that's a jerk. And road rage. Oh my gosh, so many things happen because of road rage, aggression, and fundamental attribution error is people give people the benefit of the doubt. As long as it's not like really hurting you, don't give many chances somebody's being abusive. But in situations like that, especially if you don't know the person, just think maybe it's not them. It's not who they are. Again, I was at a restaurant. The waitress was very rude and really ruined the experience. It was my daughter's birthday, and her rudeness, we actually walked out and laughed because of her attitude was really bad. And we have to think, is that the way she is? I mean, you can always do reviews, talk to the manager, or what if what if she's going through a divorce? I mean, it doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it's, again, to say, is that who she is? Or is it a situation she's in that's increasing the stress in her life? And stress definitely increases aggressiveness. I mean, heat also, the hotter countries, or when it's hotter days, it can increase. So there's situations that increase the likelihood of certain behaviors like aggression. Again, if you commit a crime, besides insanity or something like PMDD in some, which is hormonal in some countries, can be an excuse, but it's not an excuse to be mean to people or rude, or not do your job well, but it's to understand that sometimes people are going through things. I also saw online, social media, somebody asking people, what are you going through right now? One girl said she's grieving the suicide of her brother. Another person, I mean, people shared really deep things, and they're just walking down the street with all these challenges. Life is difficult and challenging, and sometimes beautiful and wonderful. And some people said, this best day, I just got engaged, or my sister had a baby, or it's my birthday, like something great, or just I love my job and I'm so happy. It's or it's Friday, whatever it is. It can be good or negative, but just to know that some people are going through really challenging things and you might not know. And so, again, to have kind of compassion and empathy. But again, if you go to this restaurant, this person's all the time, again, it could be the situation that's ongoing in their life. Just maybe don't go there anymore. But if it's just like a stranger one-time thing, to maybe calm yourself down and think, I don't know what this person is going through. Maybe to have some patience and compassion. Definitely to not react aggressively. So the question is, was it because of the situation you were in, or that you did a bad thing, according to the questions in the video, or who you are at the core? Is that who you are? And so it looks at situation versus personality, your disposition. And then looking at, we'll talk about some of these later on, another video of treatment and disorders, which we're going to cover. And also how the role of others in an environment, like for reaction, to help others, the bystander effect, for example. So the bystander effect is when the more people are around, the more likely you are to not do something to help, because you're thinking somebody else can help. And it's been shown that the more people around, the slower the reaction time. And so they've done studies, like you're in an online, like we do Zoom class, and the professor says, or another student says something happened to them. The more students in the class, the slower the reaction to get help, because everybody's thinking somebody else is going to do something about it. I had a situation, and because I know, and if you're aware of the bystander effect, I was at a restaurant and with my family, and somebody in another table seemed to like have fainted or passed out, maybe even passed away. It seemed like it was very serious. And I grabbed my phone and started calling 911. And I remember my dad saying, no, don't call. I'm sure somebody's called already. And I thought, I'm going to make sure, because that's what the bystander effect is. Everybody assumes that somebody else has called, and nobody maybe has called. And that's what happened with Kitty Genovese, a very sad case of a woman that was murdered in her apartment building. And I mean, there's different opinions about this, but when we use it in social psychology, is that nobody called. Maybe they were afraid, or he could hear, but maybe others thought somebody else might have called. So what happens when you hear a noise in the neighborhood? You're like, oh, I'm sure somebody else called the police, or I don't want to get involved. That's another issue. But if it's, you want to help, but you think somebody else might have already helped, or also you don't feel like you're personally responsible. Why do I have to do something? Why do I have to get involved? We find that the less people are around, the more responsibility you take. If you're in a classroom, 30 students, teacher passes out, you're likely to say, well, somebody else made me do something. I don't want to intervene. But what if it's just you and the teacher? You feel like, I have to do something because it's just me. Or maybe two students, it's just like, why didn't anybody do anything, the three of you? So reaction times are slower, and the likelihood of somebody doing something is also less likely. At a mall, so you think you're so safe at a mall or a lot of people, but actually people are more likely to help you the less people are around, because then they are responsible. People are saying, well, you were in the room, why didn't you do anything? You can't diffuse it. So diffusion of responsibility, you can't diffuse it to others. And so you're more likely to take action, and that happens psychologically. There's exceptions, heroes, and your personal values and beliefs. You're like, I don't care how many people are around. And I've seen it where people step in. So when I called in that situation, when I called the police, they said, oh, ambulance is coming, somebody's already called. And my dad's like, you see, I'm like, doesn't matter. If I see something on the street that's in the middle of the road, I'll call and say there's something in the middle of the road. If they say, thank you for letting me know, or somebody has already called, because everybody might assume somebody has already called and not do anything. I know that happens psychologically. So I make sure better safe than sorry. So I called just in case. Good. So because we could all be standing there waiting for the ambulance, and every minute, as you know, in healthcare is precious. And so that's why when you're doing CPR, they say, you're supposed to call out you in the red shirt and kind of point at them, and maybe something else. You call 911, because if you say somebody call 911, everybody's kind of like frozen and thinking somebody else should call. They don't want to be the one to call. You point somebody out and they don't call. It's like, oh my gosh, we asked you specifically. The more specific, the better, the less people, even the reaction times. Okay. And then, so for this week, there's those great few videos. And then this is what I want you to email to me. So again, we would have, right now, we would probably break up into groups and have you guys do a discussion. Next, 3 people, 5 minutes each, discuss what did you think of Milgram's experiment? What did you post in the discussion? And what do you think you would do? Again, we don't know unless we're in that situation, because if we would have asked maybe some of the people that were in that situation, they would have never thought that that's what they would do. So imagine you're in my class and I offer extra credit, and this isn't Milgram's, but it's kind of to get you thinking. I say, come in after class to the office, and it's about memory, it's psychology. Other students are going to be part of it. You're going to be the one administering the shock. There's a student who has volunteered to receive the shock. They know the shock level. We test it out. You feel it, and you're like, oh, okay. So you know it's real, or you think it's real, but that's the important thing. You think it's real. In the experiment, nobody got shocked. It was all fake. It was an actor. And so we would do the same. Nobody, because it's unethical in psychology. You can't do experiments where you're hurting others. It's part of ethics and animals, and that's why some of the studies that were done in the past we wouldn't be able to do today, like learn helplessness and Seligman study, again, because it was shocking animals. So here it's pretend shocking, and you say, yes, I want to be part of it, extra credit. In Milgram's study, they got money, and it's been replicated and very similar results. And so we find that there's situations that increase certain behaviors in people. We had of all ages, gender, socioeconomic, and Americans. And so, I mean, the reason Milgram study, going back to it, is because it was during a time during the war where people were saying, how could the atrocities that happened in Germany and the concentration camps, like, were these monsters that were doing this? Like, who would do this? Who would be capable of doing this? And they must have been born that way, just it's evil. And yes, definitely some people believe it's just evilness that did all those things. But others were wondering, what if regular people in certain roles, uniforms, and that we're going to talk about the Stanford prison experiment that also shows how certain roles and uniforms and environments can increase behavior in those that have not shown any signs of aggressive behavior and mental health issues. So here they wanted to see, looking at obedience to authority, because in World War II, just obedience to authority that told them to do this, and they did it. How could they do those things? gas chambers, and just the Holocaust and the horrors, and in other situations, Abu Ghraib in one of the prisons. So there's sometimes people are like, it's just bad apples. But some were saying, what if it's a bad barrel? What if it's not a bad apple? And a situation can bring out the worst in humans, even the nicest of humans that would never ever think that they would be capable of it. So potentially we're all capable of certain things in those type of situations. Can behavior be like dialed up and down? Increase the likelihood. So it doesn't guarantee it, cause and effect, but increases. So there was a correlation. So what if I said, part of the study, the student is going in another room, you're going to be in another room, but you can hear them, and we show you a box, you press a lever, it increases in shock strength, and so it hurts more, and you can hear the student when they get an answer wrong, they scream. It's the same, everybody hears the same because it's a recording. And then when it gets to about 150, the shock, so you agree to it, you know what it is. As you get there and we tell you, okay, for extra credit, everybody has agreed. And then when it gets to 150, you hear the other students say, no, I don't want the shock anymore. They have a heart condition. We already knew they had a heart condition. They said, this is dangerous. Please stop. I want out. So at that point, what would you do? So I want you to tell me, write me an email for credit for this class, saying, what do you feel you would do in that situation? Again, we don't know unless we're in those situations, but I want to hear your thoughts. At 150, the student says this, because what we find is that those who stopped were later on were more likely to have continued past this point. I mean, once that's like an important point, once the person is saying they don't want to be part of it. So it's kind of like a crucial point. Those who continued actually were more likely to go all the way to like dangerous levels of shock. Like there's a skull, XXX. You can see that in the video. And I'm also going to put a link to a video that I want you to watch for part of the class today, some of the time, that it's a video about his life. So Milgram's life. It's a movie. It's not a documentary. And so I as a psychologist, I love looking at the researchers, like the psychologists who are behind kind of these famous studies about, from positive psychology to health psychology to social psychology to all these are kind of landmark studies. And so it's about Milgram, his life, what he was going through, and kind of the feedback that he got from doing these studies and his personal life. So you can see some of that in that link that I'll put for you to watch. And so, and also in the email that you sent me, if you can also let me know, what did you think about Milgram after watching the movie? What are your thoughts about him as a person and the studies that he did? Because you see both while he's doing the studies and what he's going through in his marriage and personal life and professional life as a professor, researcher. And so it shows other studies, not just this one that he did. They would do things like, social psychologists love to do experiments like having a person go into an elevator and face back instead of forward. What would you do? In today's world, I think we're hypersensitive to anybody who breaks social norms. So it's what's expected, behavior that's expected. Students are expected to sit in class. People are supposed to face forward in an elevator. Otherwise, it makes us nervous, especially violence that has happened. So we're like, is something bad going to happen when somebody breaks the norm? So not just uncomfortable, but maybe even afraid, or somebody sits too close to you on a bench. We have different countries have the distance that they feel comfortable with somebody being too close. Some, Latin countries, it's less distance. In the Western world, more, or touching while you're talking, or being late. How long is too long for somebody to be late to meet you for lunch, for example? In the US and Western world, 15 minutes. In other countries, 45 minutes, where we think no, without letting you know they're running late. 45 minutes, oh, it's fine, you wait. For us, it's like after 15 minutes, we feel like it's rude. We might leave or be really upset if they haven't let us know, and they could have. And so with Milgram's study, as we go back to that, is looking at obedience to authority. Who's more likely to obey and in what circumstances? And is it situational like we talked about, or is it dispositional? And so what we find is that you're in the room, 150 volts. Some people said, no, I'm not going. I'm not okay with hurting somebody. So I'm telling you, it's okay. The school is part of it. You're not going to get in trouble. You're not personally responsible. Don't worry. Keep going. And people said, the people who stopped at that point said, I don't care. It goes against my values. I don't hurt people against their will. I don't care if I'm not going to get in trouble. I don't care about the money, extra credit. So in Milgram study, that's what happened. At that point, people, those who stopped were more likely to stop there. It's like a line that you cross. Those who continued, it's like they went forward for the money. They got paid, not a lot though, to keep hurting somebody. And again, these were moms, dads, workers, from mailrooms to just working class Americans that were part of the study. And again, it's been replicated. And so at that point, the student, for example, in our class, keeps saying, please stop, their heart is hurting. And I say, keep going. So the researchers there, I'm there saying, next to you saying, just keep going. It's okay. People are stressed about keep going, like keep shocking somebody else. Now it's against their will, but keep going. And then at one point, you hear the student just kind of go thump, and you don't hear anymore. And I tell you, you got to keep going. You're like, what? Shouldn't we go check on them? Like, what if they're not okay? Like, should we call for help? Imagine they have gone silent. People kept going. And when asked why, they said, because I was told to. So they hurt somebody against their will, potentially unconscious, did not get help for them, and kept going. And the only thing the researcher Milgram study said was, keep going. You have to keep going. You signed up for this. It wasn't threat. It wasn't, we're going to sue you. It wasn't physically, if you don't do it, we're going to hurt you. There was no threat. It was just, you have to keep going. You agreed to this. That's it. Because they were told to. They obeyed somebody they saw in authority. So this is to show what happens when somebody we feel is in authority tells us to do something that goes against our values, that goes against what you believe is right. Should you obey? And so laws maybe that you feel are not right, humanitarian, or somebody at your work, or at the hospital, or in the military, or police, or a parent, just somebody that you feel you need to obey. Do you obey if you feel like it's wrong? It's not okay because you're told to, that you have to obey. And what if it's hurting somebody else against their will? Or, usually hurting somebody, like, unless it's like sadist. So when this study was done, so again, imagine what you would do. And at the end, they were all told, this was an actor, nobody got hurt. And they were really distraught to see what they were capable of doing, again, when somebody was told to do it. We looked at different factors. Before the study, they asked psychologists, many psychologists, professionals, they said, how many people in the study do you think will go all the way, 450 volts? Again, skulls, XXX, the person's unconscious, not responding. Like, oh my goodness, maybe 1%, because of sadists, people that in society, there's like maybe potentially 1% of those who enjoy part of a group. There might be up to 1% of those who enjoy inflicting pleasures. They get pleasure on inflicting pain on others. So masochists are people who get pleasure out of receiving pain. And so they said maybe 1%. They were shocked to find that on average, and again, when this is replicated, 65% on average, 2/3 of participants went all the way, past the 150, saying no, stop, past the complaints about their heart, past the unconscious, no response, all the way. And this is a shock experiment, and psychologists were shocked, community was shocked that this could happen. And like I said, replicated. So I want to hear your thoughts. And what we have found is also that the situation can increase or decrease that number. So on average, the situation, 2/3, 65%. But we find that it can go as low. Let me give you some of the factors, and then I'm going to talk about some of the other studies that are kind of monumental in social psychology. So what we found is that, let's see here, and I'm going to put this PowerPoint up on social psychology for you to follow. It has all the key points about Milgram study, Ash's study, Katie Genevieve's fundamental attribution error, dispositional factors, and the Stanford Prison Experiment, as well as others. But these are kind of the main ones. I wanted to have discussions and videos for you to watch on. And so what we find is that there's things that increase the likelihood of it happen, things that decreases. So what increases the likelihood? This is very, very important. We find that the percentage goes all the way to over 90% of participants will go all the way, the shock, if they see a peer go all the way. That's the power of seeing others who we consider like ourselves that do something. So that could have played a role in the war, in situations where people, if you see somebody else doing it, you're like, well, they're like me and they're going all the way, then maybe I should too. So that's amazing if you see that. And then we also find, for example, if women are the subject, then it stays about the 65. So it stays about the same if the person telling you to do it is close by. But what we find is that if the person that's telling you to hurt the other participant is not there in the room, they're maybe sending an email or in another room or texting or on the phone, then remote authority goes to about 20%. So we see it starting to decrease when, about 20% if the person's not there. Also, this is also very important, if you see a peer rebelling, so it goes to 10%. So from 90%, if you see a peer doing it, that's the power of others that you consider a peer. They're like me and they're not doing it. So if you see somebody another student say, no, that's wrong. So if you speak up, if you really feel an injustice is being done, something's wrong, even if authority tells you to do it, if you really feel in your heart or it goes against your values, if you speak up, others might speak up and say, yeah, that's not right. And they might not do it. Where if we go along with it, others are more likely to go along with it too. So I always think of you're in a group, everybody's saying, yeah, let's jump off. Like I'm from Hawaii. So I'm thinking, I remember going to like waterfalls and we're in a group and everybody's like, yeah, that looks safe. The thing is, if everybody in the group is saying it looks safe, then you're more likely to go along with it. We're going to talk about Ash's study and conformity too, not just obedience to authority. This goes into the next topic, but it's if you speak up. If one person says, no, I don't think so, I don't think it looks safe, other people might be, I thought so too, but I didn't want to say anything, I was just going along. The other component before moving on is if you see people in authority like not in agreement, you see me and another instructor saying we should stop, or no, we shouldn't, then you're like, I don't know if I want to be part of this. And then the other is the least, like 1%, only like 1 or 2%. If you hear the person that's being shocked, ask to be shocked. So if you hear them say, shock me, please shock me, that kind of freaks people out. And they're like, no, I don't want to do this. This is weird. So I'll have that in the PowerPoint, and we'll continue with Ash's study and the rest of, and the Stanford Prison Experiment.